what to do now that I was healed. I'd had this incredible, powerful healing that blistered the skin. My whole body was healing. I was going into these unwinds. But what to do now with my life? Was I just going to go back to being a chiropractor? No, I wanted to heal the world, and I wanted to use that power on other people and let other people experience that power. So I wanted to develop myself spiritually and become this incredible spiritual healer, which and I had a manual for it as well called Power versus Force, which was written by David Hawkins, who had had a very similar experience to mine. He had had a mystical experience when he was young, and then as a psychiatrist when he was 30, he had developed this terrible illness that there was no diagnosis either, and he got very ill. He was close to death, and then also had this incredible sort of letting go, and then this healing coming through him, this incredible healing coming through him, and he had healed completely, and then gone off on a different tangent. So I thought, well, using this manual, it had to do with realizing that you are the soul and the ego, and then just observing the ego's thoughts, the fears and the ego, and kind of dividing your thoughts into two, and recognizing which thoughts are the soul and which are the ego. So I was doing that, and I was meditating 5 hours a day, reading every book on spirituality that I could, and once again secluding myself from friends and from dating and from having fun, because my objective was on healing the world, which I thought was my destiny, but it was a very ego sort of driven thing. And after about 6 months, my wrist started aching as well, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that was possible, and I couldn't sleep either. I was so stressed, and I deteriorated rapidly. I got onto benzodiazepines like Valium, except I was on lorazepam, which has got a way shorter half-life, and I was just popping those every night to try and sleep. But the withdrawals from those are really bad, and I tried to go off those, and that didn't work, and I just tried everything. I threw everything at it. I hired a friend of mine to Haley to be my hands and feed me and wash me, but she couldn't wash me. She only washed my back, and then just drive me around, and I try to sort of come back into the world, but I just deteriorated, and quite rapidly, to a point after about a couple months, after 4 or 5 months, I was sort of right back where I had zero use of my hands. And after about 5 or 6 months, I was starting to show signs of organ failure again. And then I started developing this rash in my nether regions. So because of every time I urinated, I had no one to clean that area. So I developed this really bad skin rash, and I just thought, now this is the end, because I couldn't get Haley to wash it. She was a friend of mine, and couldn't get my dad to come out of work and wash it. And that night I said to my dad, I said, listen, we're going to have to go to India, because I'd started following this guru in India that at that time was very, very popular and was performing many miracles, and I'd heard of him through quite a few friends, and I thought, well, this is my only way out. My dad came back the next evening and said, there's absolutely no ways. The logistics are just impossible. So I walked out onto the beach that night, and I was just completely, I thought, well, this is the end. My body's shutting down. I've tried everything. I've had suicidal thoughts as well for months, many months now, and those aren't improving, and there's no way out. That man in India had always been my one maybe way out, and now that had been closed down too, and I just thought, no ways. And then as I was on the beach, because I'd been reading all these spiritual books that spoke about time and space not being exactly what we think they are, and there were movies like What the Bleep and The Secret, so I was trying to kind of incorporate all these ideas into a whole lot of other spiritual books that I'd been reading. I thought, well, if I can't go there to India, maybe he can come to me. And all of a sudden, which, I believe it was my brain's survival mechanism at the time, because I was completely at my wit's end. My brain's survival mechanism just realized, no, he can come here. This incredible healing man with this incredible power to heal people within seconds can come to me, because time and space are immaterial. And I walked back to the hotel room where I was staying, and my dad had downloaded from the internet these pictures of this guy, of this Indian healer. And as I looked at his face, I started to feel popping in my fingers. Now, I was seeing the occupational therapist, and once again, it was taking 10 minutes to bend one finger just to sort of 90 degrees. And I felt popping in the fingers and in the wrists. I just felt just this popping, like bubbles popping. And then all of a sudden, my arms would be flailing around like crazy. And then I'd kind of be sort of completely out of my own sort of mental control. But there was this power that just came through me, and incredible power. My hands would just start, really squeezing against the fibrosis that was in the tendons, and all the swelling that was in the joints. The fingers had swollen right up, and sort of started really contracting against that. And I was petrified, of course, because I could feel the inflammation. It got really, really painful in the wrists and these really weak tendons. So, and then my arms would just kind of fall back to their sides, and then popping again, and just like little bubbles popping. And then that heat and that inflammation and that pain would just go away. And then my arms would flail around again, and then come back to the sides again. Sorry, and the contractions again. And then the popping and the pain would just go away. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this was happening. And it was so much more powerful than the time before. In fact, I healed completely within 5 hours. And if power is a function of time, if power is energy divided by time, if I healed in 5 hours in the previous time, my body went from close to death, and with incredible amount of power, it took me 6 months to heal. This time was 582 times more powerful than the time before, which is important, because if I was going to have another episode, then that would be incrementally more powerful. 580 times squared would be 7,000 times more powerful. So, but I didn't know yet that I might even get to witness this later on in my life. So this was incredible. I just couldn't believe it. But then the next day, the power never came back, and I was really, really distressed. And I was like, have you deserted me? And I had a really dark night of the soul. I even threw away my benzos. And then I stood on a railway line. I was really, really depressed. But the train never came. And then I went back to my dad and I said, listen, you have to go and see a really good psychiatrist. And she put me on really good medication. And so I could sleep through the night. And most of the healing had already been done on my hands. So then I just had to do what the occupational therapist had shown me. And that was in sort of November. And by Christmas Day, I went and caught my first wave. I paddled out. It was pretty rough. And even though I had to push up with my fists, I actually surfed on my first wave. So now what was it going to do with my life? Because I tried to become this incredible healer, and that definitely, I didn't want to go through that again. Now I just had to have as much fun as possible. So that's what I did for about a year. I had as much fun as possible. I was kite surfing, I was windsurfing. I went and saw this guru in India. I spent some time in Thailand, and then I came back, but then I had to get back to work. And I realized that I had to get back to work, but I had this incredible anxiety, because each time I thought of getting back to work, just this anxiety built up. And then one day I came back from a walk on the beach with my dogs, and I was just exhausted, and something made me turn on the television. And on the television was this documentary called America Undercover Panic, with Kim Basinger and Earl Campbell, amongst others. And both of them, Earl Campbell, the famous American football player, both of them describing their own battles with anxiety disorder and with panic attacks. And they explained how the problem isn't so much the anxiety attacks, the problem is actually the seclusion that you have from the anxiety attacks. And this just spoke to me. It was like, that's exactly what's happened to me. Is I've even though I was having as much fun as possible, it was still, my life was very limited. You know, I wasn't yet working, and I wasn't yet doing as much as I could. So then I just had to really step into the fear, and that's what I did. Is I opened a practice, and sure, I just had like 1 or maybe 2 anxiety attacks every single day, but I knew that I had to go through this period in order to overcome it. And it was a very scary time, but a very fun time as well, because I was going out and I was going out at night, and I was making friends, and I was dating, and I was actually drinking quite a lot as well, even though I was still on that medication. But I was just throwing everything at it just to kind of get over this anxiety. And the anxiety over those months actually decreased. The anxiety attacks decreased. And the clinic started doing well. It was in the city, in a beautiful area, sort of with a lovely park nearby and a health shop just around the corner that I got to know the owners. And it started doing better and better, but I was still only working 3 days a week. And 2 of those days, Monday and Wednesday, that I wasn't working, I was spending in complete seclusion. You know, I was having my day of silence on Wednesday, but on Monday as well, I also just was spending in seclusion because I felt like I had to. Well, I kind of did, to kind of let my brain simmer down and give it a break from all the anxiety attacks that I was having. But the weekends were just jam-packed with friends and fun, and even Thursday nights I was out partying, and I really recovered during that phase. And then I did that for quite a few years, and then I realized, you know what, I'm still living in seclusion. I'm still having those 2 days of complete seclusion, and still having to, when the anxiety built up, I still couldn't get over this anxiety, and I realized that I had post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So I looked it up, and I realized the best thing for that was exposure therapy. So for 10 minutes every week, I would put myself into the worst case scenario. I would imagine that the problem with the hands had come back, and I had having these suicidal thoughts, and so I'd expose my brain to it for 10 minutes every week, and then afterwards I'd flush myself out. I'd either use the purple flame, or I'd use the spiritual whirlwind, which is another technique where you kind of above your body and you kind of flush yourself out. And then I just had to kind of really step into the fear. And because I realized now it had been 21 years that I'd been living in seclusion. Even though seclusion wasn't as bad, I still wasn't living a normal life, and I just wanted to live a normal life. So then I just had to live and do things every day that a normal person would do, and my body just said no ways, and there was just so much fear then. But because of the exposure therapy, my brain was used to it. So but it was still very, very scary, and I didn't sleep the first night, but then I just carried on like a normal person. The next day, I went surfing in the morning, or whatever it is. If there wasn't good waves, then I'd go and do stuff, and then on weekends I'd do stuff, and I didn't sleep at all for 8 or 9 days. It's hard to say for certain because I was so delirious by that stage, but I didn't go crazy, and that was my biggest fear. And so I realized, and then I started sleeping, and then now I could live normally. And finally, my donkey was gone. It was completely gone now. So I was completely over this thing that had been with me for 21 years, since I was 20, and I took the magic mushrooms. And by now I was like 41, 42. So now what was I going to do with my life? And I'll talk about that next time.